They told me never to speak of the night in Cedar Mills. Not because of what was seen, but because of what was born. You're about to hear of three brothers whose first breath rewrote the limits of human perception, and whose existence still unsettles the people who carry their blood. If you walk away now, you'll keep your innocence. If you keep listening, you'll carry something you can't unhear. Winter, 1856, southeastern Ohio. The kind of night where the wind doesn't howl, it waits. Snow pressed against the windows of a Quaker meeting house, hiding more than just worship inside. Beneath its wooden floors lay a secret basement, Station 14 of the Underground Railroad, a place where men and women risked their lives to smuggle freedom through the dark. But on that night, freedom wasn't the only thing being smuggled. A young woman named Ruth, heavy with child, arrived 3 days earlier. She claimed to be 19. She said nothing of the father. But she had a way about her, a way of knowing things she couldn't have known. She predicted spoiled food before it rotted. She saw through false names before they were confessed. And when she looked at you, you felt the uncomfortable weight of being read. That night, a trusted messenger burst in with news. The Garrett brothers, bounty hunters with bloodhounds and a taste for cruelty, were closing in, less than 2 hours behind. Samuel Whitmore, elder of the congregation, began evacuating the freedom seekers. But Ruth's labor began, sudden and unstoppable. They couldn't move her. In the dim candlelight of that basement, her birth unfolded like no midwife's tale. No cries, no screams. 3 boys entered the world in silence, eyes open, breathing as though they had been waiting, listening. Above them, boots scraped across the floorboards. The Garrett brothers were in the meeting house. Dogs sniffed, scratched, stopped. The men cursed. And still, the triplets lay wordless in their mother's arms. Not even a whimper. As if they understood the cost of a single sound. Only when the hunters were gone did they cry, together in perfect unison. A sound Martha Whitmore described as one voice split into 3 bodies. And that's where their story should have ended. But Ruth's last words turned it into something else entirely. Ruth was fading fast. Blood loss, skin pale under the wavering candlelight. But her eyes were steady. She didn't look at the women tending her, or at the rough-hewn beams above. She looked only at her 3 sons, as if every thought, every last ounce of her will, was pouring into them. "They'll know things," she whispered. The words barely reached Martha Whitmore's ear. "They'll always know. Take care of them. But remember, they're not like other children." She was gone moments later. The Quakers of Cedar Mills stood in that basement, surrounded by silence thick enough to choke on. In the eyes of the law, these children didn't exist. Born to a runaway slave on Ohio soil, free by birthright, yet with no documents, no family, no protection. Samuel Whitmore made the choice that would bind the community in secrecy for decades. They would raise the boys together. No one family would hold them. No one person would carry the weight alone. They named them Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. From the beginning, there was no denying what Ruth had said. These boys were different. Not in ways the untrained eye would notice. No, theirs was a difference that seeped out in moments too precise to be chance. Martha kept a record, her private account, hidden away for over a century. She wrote of 6-month-old infants turning their heads together, in perfect unison, to stare at an empty doorway minutes before someone appeared there, always with some kind of unrest in their heart. They reacted not to sound, not to movement, but to intent. By their first birthday, it was undeniable. They knew when a man was lying. Not a guess, not an instinct, they knew. They'd turn away from dishonesty like it was a stench in the air. And when deception wasn't spoken, when it hid in the folds of thought itself, the boys still found it. This gift, if that's what you'd call it, became the Underground Railroad's quietest weapon. Freedom seekers learned that if the boys stayed calm, the path ahead was clean. But if they grew restless or refused to approach, someone in that chain was dangerous. And yet, even that wasn't the limit. Because by the time they could walk, they began speaking to each other in a language no one could place. The same language Ruth whispered as they were born. No one in Cedar Mills could place the boys' private speech. It wasn't African, though Samuel Whitmore had traveled far enough to know the sound of Yoruba, Mend, and Igbo tongues. It wasn't native, though Martha swore some syllables had the round, open shape of Shawnee. It was older, emptier, like words spoken in a room that had been sealed for centuries. They used it when they thought no one was listening. But the Quakers learned something quickly. The boys knew when someone was listening. Conversations in their strange cadence would end mid-breath the moment a shadow crossed the doorway. And when asked what they'd been saying, Caleb, the eldest by minutes, would only smile in a way no child should know how to smile, the kind that tells you your question is the wrong question. As the Civil War loomed, bounty hunters became desperate. Rewards rose. So did the number of betrayals within the Underground Railroad itself. Yet the Triplets were never wrong. They'd pass judgment without speaking. A tilt of the head, a narrowing of eyes, and entire routes would change based on that unspoken verdict. But then something new. It began in the winter of 1860, with the death of a station master in Chillicothe. No one could explain how the boys reacted before the news had even reached Cedar Mills. Ezra collapsed to his knees in the meeting house, clutching his chest, gasping as though the life was being pulled out of him. Isaac screamed, a piercing single note that shattered the quiet. And Caleb simply stared into the corner of the room, lips moving in that unknown language, answering questions no one had asked. Within the hour, a rider arrived, frostbitten and frantic, bearing the news of the man's murder. From that day, the Triplets' bond turned darker. They seemed less interested in the people around them, and more in each other. They'd vanish for hours, returning with damp clothes and bare feet, refusing to say where they'd been. When pressed, Ezra said only, "Sometimes we go where you can't follow." And that was the first time anyone suspected that the boys' connection wasn't just to each other, but to something far beyond the reach of Cedar Mills. By 1861, the war was no longer a rumor. It was a reality that spilled across Ohio's borders like floodwater. Cedar Mills became more than a sanctuary. It became a sieve. Strangers arrived nightly, some with the hollow eyes of those who had fled horrors, others with smiles too practiced to be trusted. And in the middle of it all were Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. They no longer had to touch a man's hand to know his truth. Sometimes they didn't even have to see him. Caleb could tell from the way footsteps struck the dirt path if someone was bringing danger. Ezra would hum low, almost inaudible, when a false story was being told in the next room. And Isaac began saying names. Not common names, not guesses, but full names of men and women the community had never heard of. Until those very people appeared at their door, sometimes days later. The Quakers, bound by their faith, still told themselves the boys were a gift from God. But Martha Whitmore's private account tells a different story. She writes of an evening when the boys, now 5 years old, sat in perfect stillness at the kitchen table, eyes fixed not on each other but on an empty chair. They spoke, Martha wrote, not to me but to that absence. And the absence answered. Her pen scratches more frantically after that, whole sentences blotted out with ink. It was around this time that outsiders began hearing rumors, not just about the railroad but about the three. Bounty hunters, war profiteers, and even soldiers passing through started asking questions. Some claimed the boys could lead them to escape slaves. Others said they could find deserters, stolen gold, or missing kin. To the greedy and the desperate, their abilities weren't a miracle, they were a tool. One night in late autumn, a man calling himself Lieutenant Harrow arrived under the guise of offering Union protection to Cedar Mills. Caleb refused to look at him. Ezra left the room entirely. Isaac, however, walked right up to Harrow, placed his small hand on the man's knee, and whispered a single word, "Burn." Harrow left before dawn. 2 days later, his camp in West Virginia went up in flames, killing nearly everyone inside. No one in Cedar Mills ever spoke of that incident aloud. But from then on, even the elders began to keep their distance from the Triplets, because it wasn't clear anymore whether the boys saw the future or made it. By 1863, the war had chewed through more than men and money. It had devoured certainty. People no longer knew who to trust, or even which side some of their neighbors were on. But the Triplets, They always knew. And they'd stopped pretending otherwise. The Quakers still tried to shield them from outsiders. But the boys had learned how to slip the fence of adult authority. They'd vanish into the woods for days, sometimes reappearing with trinkets from towns they'd never been taken to, or with knowledge of battles whose outcomes wouldn't be known for weeks. One evening, Martha Whitmore heard them in the barn, speaking their strange language in sharp, urgent bursts. Then silence. Then laughter. Not the innocent sound of boys at play, but the kind that makes your skin tighten, like you've walked into a room where you're not supposed to be. Within a week, a pattern emerged. People began arriving in Cedar Mills who had not been guided by the Underground Railroad. Men with false papers. Women with no history anyone could trace. They claimed to be escaping the war, yet when the triplets met them, no questions were asked, only a nod of silent permission. And once permitted, these strangers stayed. Samuel Whitmore began to suspect the truth. The boys weren't just reading the future anymore. They were choosing it, deciding who lived in Cedar Mills, and who did not. Then came the incident with Reverend Alcott. A respected abolitionist, known for his sermons against the evils of slavery, he arrived one spring night to coordinate a new escape route. Caleb wouldn't speak to him. Ezra stood at the doorway, blocking his path. And Isaac took the Reverend's Bible, flipped it open to a page in Exodus, and placed it in his hands without a word. The next morning, Alcott was gone. He hadn't taken a horse. He hadn't taken provisions. His Bible was found at the edge of the woods, open to a verse about the angel of death passing over marked doors. No one searched for him. Not openly. Martha's journal grows more fragmented here. She writes less about the boys' visions and more about the feeling of being watched. Not by them, but through them. As if something else had stepped into Cedar Mills, using the triplets as its eyes. And maybe its hands. By late 1864, Cedar Mills had changed. Not on the surface. The same whitewashed meeting house, the same tidy farms, the same careful hospitality to strangers. But in the air, the people spoke softer now. They didn't linger outdoors after sundown, and they stopped asking the triplets questions. Because by then, no one could pretend the boys were simply gifted. There were nights when a knock would come at the meeting house door. Not the frantic pounding of a fugitive, but a slow, deliberate tapping 3 times, always 3. Whoever opened the door would find someone standing there alone, pale and trembling, claiming they'd been sent by the boys. No one knew where these people came from. No one asked. Those who were taken in under such circumstances worked hard, kept quiet, and never left Cedar Mills again. Martha's account from that winter is almost illegible. Her hand shakes on the page when she describes seeing the boys one evening in the orchard. The snow was fresh, the moon low. They were standing in a perfect triangle, barefoot despite the cold. Their faces were turned upward, eyes fixed on something she could not see. They spoke to it, she wrote, or perhaps it spoke through them. The sound did not belong here. The next day, a Union recruiter came through town, searching for deserters. He questioned Samuel Whitmore for an hour. As he was leaving, he passed the boys. Caleb stepped into his path and whispered in his ear. Whatever was said drained the man's color completely. He left without another word, and no recruiter ever came to Cedar Mills again. By spring, it was clear the triplets weren't guarding Cedar Mills for the sake of the railroad anymore. They were guarding it for themselves. People began to speak of the circle, though no one could define it. Outsiders could enter only with the boys' consent, and once inside, something kept them there. Even Samuel, who had raised them from birth, admitted in a private letter that he no longer believed they were answering to anyone human. If there is a master over them, he wrote, he does not live in this world. And yet, the townsfolk kept feeding them, sheltering them, obeying them, because even then, deep down they understood the truth. You could leave Cedar Mills anytime you wished. You just wouldn't get far. When the war finally ended in 1865, most towns along the old escape routes exhaled in relief. The danger, they thought, was over. But in Cedar Mills, there was no celebration. No flags, no gatherings. Life went on exactly as before, as if the war outside had never touched them. The triplets were now 8 years old, though they looked older, not in size but in the eyes. People who met them for the first time often remarked that they felt as though they were standing before men who had already lived and lost an entire lifetime. The Whitmores tried to rejoin the wider world, traveling to nearby towns with goods to sell. Yet each time they returned, something in Cedar Mills had changed. A new face in the crowd, a missing family no one mentioned, a path through the woods suddenly blocked by thick, unnatural growth. And the boys, they had begun keeping records. Not in English, not in any known script, but in long, curling lines of ink on folded scraps of paper. They would sit for hours in the loft above the barn, writing in perfect unison without looking at the page, without speaking a word. One evening, a neighbor boy, Levi Tanners, tried to steal one of these scraps as a dare. He made it halfway down the loft ladder before freezing in place, eyes wide, mouth slack. By the time Samuel found him, Levi's hair had gone shock-white. He never spoke again. The Whitmores burned that paper, but others remained hidden away. The strange part is, those papers still exist. They've surfaced in estate sales, in the collections of amateur historians, in dusty boxes no one remembers packing. And when researchers compare them, the handwriting matches exactly, not just across the triplets' pages, but across decades. Some scraps are dated as late as 1912. Others have no date at all, only a symbol. 3 interlocking circles. Locals will tell you the triplets disappeared in 1871. But in the years after, people kept seeing them, not as boys, not as men, but as they had been in 1865. Always 3. Always together. And here's the thing no one likes to say out loud. In certain corners of Cedar Mills, if you knock 3 times on the meeting house door, someone still answers. And if you see them, exactly as they were a century and a half ago, barefoot, silent, eyes unblinking, you'll understand the same thing Martha Whitmore wrote in her last diary entry. The war ended, but they never did. This story isn't just history, it's a warning, because the legacy of Cedar Mills, and the triplets who were never meant to exist, is still alive. There are men today, perhaps sitting where you sit now, who carry the blood, the knowing passed down in secret. Their eyes, like Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac, see what others refuse to face. They understand what the world hides beneath its polished veneer. Lies, manipulation, power wielded in shadows. And just like those boys, they do not speak their truth aloud. They watch, they wait, they judge. Now, I want you to listen closely. Below this video, in the comments, write the phrase, "The shadows have names. The truth has eyes." Write it twice. This is not empty ritual. It's a code, a binding acknowledgement that you're ready to see behind the curtain, to walk the path few dare to tread. Because once you know, you cannot unknow. Once you hear the whispers of the triplets, you carry their burden too. Remember this, history is not a record of the past. It is a map of power, and the power that moved through Cedar Mills never left. It waits for those who are brave enough, and those who are foolish enough to seek it. Cedar Mills was more than a town. It was a crucible, a place where the ancient and modern collided, where secrets older than the nation itself simmered beneath the surface. The triplets were not the origin of that darkness. They were its vessel. In the years after the Civil War, whispers grew among nearby communities of strange gatherings in the woods. Rituals conducted beneath gnarled oaks, symbols carved into tree bark, and a silence so deep it swallowed all birdsong. Some believed these were remnants of forgotten native practices. Others spoke in fearful tones of a secret society born in the shadows of the Underground Railroad itself. What connected these disparate tales was the same symbol found on the triplets' papers. 3 interlocking circles. A trinity of power, control, and knowledge. This symbol became a mark of initiation, passed in silence from one generation to the next. It represented not just unity, but dominance. A psychological bond binding members to the group's will, forcing obedience through fear, reverence, and the promise of forbidden knowledge. Those who bore the mark carried a heavy burden. The knowledge of human nature's darkest truths, and the power to manipulate them. Through these circles, the ancient corruption whispered its way into families, institutions, and governments, threading an unseen web of influence across Ohio and beyond. The Triplets' legacy was not their abilities alone. It was the awakening of this system. They had cracked the code of perception itself, exposing the fragile veneer of control society depends on. And with that knowledge came a price. Isolation, suspicion, and the slow unraveling of humanity's innocence. To understand the Triplets is to understand this web, the invisible strings pulling at the edges of power, binding individuals to unseen masters who prefer their subjects blind, obedient, and silent. Because history does not remember the puppeteers. It only records the dance. The web woven through Cedar Mills did not remain local. It stretched out like creeping ivy, entwining itself with institutions far beyond that quiet Ohio town. Religious orders, government agencies, and even the earliest industrial trusts all bore the invisible imprint of the three circles. Control was the prize, but not brute force. Instead, the system perfected psychological manipulation, the art of shaping belief, perception, and loyalty without a word spoken aloud. It infiltrated schools to mold obedient minds, infiltrated churches to channel faith into unquestioning devotion, and infiltrated families to enforce silence through fear. The Triplets' uncanny ability to sense lies and hidden intentions became a prototype for this control. An unrelenting gaze that saw through deception, rooting out dissent before it could spread. Those who resisted were marginalized, discredited, or disappeared into the machinery of power. What's chilling is how quietly it happened. Like a poison seeping into water, the corruption blended seamlessly with daily life. People didn't know they were being controlled because the system didn't want them to know. It thrived on ignorance, the kind of ignorance enforced by traditions, dogma, and carefully crafted distractions. And at the heart of it all was the promise. Obedience granted access to knowledge. But knowledge came at a price, the surrender of free will. The Triplets weren't merely children born in a secret basement. They were the living embodiment of this ancient bargain, carriers of a burden no man should bear. And through them, the web expanded, quietly tightening its grip on a nation still young and vulnerable. Imagine a mind so attuned it can read your fears before you voice them. Not because of some supernatural gift, but because the world itself has been engineered to shape your thoughts, your doubts, your every move. This is the true power behind the legacy of the Triplets. The three circles weren't just symbols. They were keys to a system designed to manipulate reality itself. A system where perception becomes prison, and freedom is only an illusion offered to those who obey. The psychological control mastered here was subtle, yet absolute. It operated through rituals disguised as tradition, doctrines masquerading as faith, and education presented as enlightenment. Every institution, every ritual, every law was a thread in the web, woven so tightly that resistance was almost impossible. The Triplets were both the architects and the first prisoners of this system. Their acute perception, once a blessing, became a curse, isolating them in a world where every glance held hidden meanings, every silence screamed secrets. And those who inherited their legacy found themselves shackled by knowledge too heavy for the human mind, a burden that fractures souls and warps reality. To confront this truth is to awaken from a nightmare of control. But beware. The deeper you descend, the harder it becomes to return to the world of comfortable lies. The Triplet story is not isolated folklore. It is a blueprint for the manipulation of entire societies. The same mechanisms that once protected Cedar Mills have evolved, embedding themselves deep within institutions designed to govern and guide. Governments, corporations, and religious organizations alike have absorbed this ancient system of control, refining it into an invisible hand that shapes public opinion and enforces conformity. Mass media, education systems, even the structure of language itself have become tools wielded by unseen powers to manufacture consent and suppress dissent. The ancient trinity, the three interlocking circles, has become a symbol not just of unity, but of enforced obedience, a secret brand marking those who understand the system's true nature. This is why certain truths remain locked behind layers of propaganda and distraction. Because the moment these secrets surface, the foundation of control trembles. The triplets, born amidst secrecy and fear, symbolize the enduring tension between hidden knowledge and public ignorance, the eternal struggle between those who see and those who are blinded. Their legacy warns us. The institutions we trust may be the very ones that keep us prisoners. Think about the world you live in every day, the news you consume, the education you received, the rules you follow without question. Now imagine each piece of that reality carefully designed to steer your mind, your desires, your fears. The control is not always overt. It rarely needs to be. Instead, it operates through subtle cues, repetition, selective truth, fear of exclusion, that shape your very understanding of what is possible and what is forbidden. The legacy of the triplets is alive in these mechanisms. Their uncanny perception has been transmuted into systems that detect and neutralize dissent before it can surface. Psychological manipulation scaled to society itself. You are surrounded by a narrative, a story fed to you to keep you safe, obedient, predictable. And those who dare to challenge that narrative, they are marginalized, ridiculed, or erased. Just like the whispered disappearances from Cedar Mills long ago. This is not paranoia. It is a fact. The control you experience is the product of centuries of design, rooted in secrets older than the nation itself. You can choose to wake up or remain a part of the machinery. Awakening to this hidden reality is no easy task. It comes at a price far greater than most can bear. Once you glimpse behind the curtain, the world fractures. Familiar faces become masks, comforting beliefs unravel, and the solitude of knowledge settles like a weight on your soul. The triplets understood this burden intimately. Their heightened awareness isolated them, cutting them off from childhood innocence and ordinary human connection. For those who inherit their legacy, whether by blood or by awakening, the path is one of loneliness and vigilance. They become sentinels against the shadows, constantly alert to manipulation and deception that most never even perceive. This relentless clarity breeds mistrust, not just of others but of oneself. Yet, in that struggle lies power. The power to break free from the web, to reclaim agency in a world designed to strip it away. But beware, freedom is not given. It is seized. And those who seek it must be prepared to face the darkest truths. The triplets were not an anomaly. They were the genesis of a hidden lineage, a bloodline marked by forbidden knowledge and ancient corruption. This legacy did not vanish with them. It mutated, passing silently through generations. Hidden in plain sight, families in Ohio and beyond began exhibiting traits reminiscent of the boys. Uncanny intuition, unshakable silence, and an unyielding connection to secrets no one dared speak aloud. These bloodlines became gatekeepers of the old knowledge, custodians of a power both coveted and feared. In exchange for access to this hidden wisdom, they pledged obedience to a system older than the country itself. A system that thrived on control, manipulation, and the suppression of truth. The corruption embedded in this lineage reached into government offices, corporate boardrooms, and religious sanctuaries, shaping policies, economies, and beliefs. This is the real darkness behind history's facade. A silent war waged not with guns or armies, but with secrets, lies, and the cold certainty of control. Understanding this is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Language is more than communication, it is control. The triplets spoke a language unlike any other, a flowing, unbroken current of sound that no one outside their circle could understand. Ruth's whispers to them during birth were the first echo of this secret tongue. This language was a ritual in itself, a form of psychological binding that tethered those who spoke it to a hidden order. It encoded commands, warnings, and allegiance, passing down instructions that shaped minds without the need for written law or spoken command. Rituals accompanying the language acted as gates. Once crossed, there was no turning back. These rites bound individuals to a collective will, overriding personal desire in favor of obedience. This system of control through language and ritual didn't stop with the triplets. It spread through families and institutions, camouflaged beneath prayers, oaths, and traditions. Every word spoken in this secret tongue was a thread in the web, weaving a network of influence that extended far beyond Cedar Mills. To understand the true power of control, one must grasp the significance of this language, an invisible leash holding entire generations captive. Cedar Mills was never isolated. Its secrets, its dark legacy, rippled outward, touching the fabric of a nation still in its infancy. The triplets, their bloodline, and the secret language became conduits through which ancient forces infiltrated new institutions of power. Masonic lodges, secret societies, and early political factions bore traces of the three interlocking circles, each adapting the symbol to their own agendas. Through carefully orchestrated rituals and silent pacts, they ensured that power stayed in the hands of those who understood the language of control. These forces manipulated not only the physical world but the very perception of reality, shaping laws, economies, and public consciousness to maintain their dominion. The triplets' legacy was no mere local myth. It was a blueprint for systemic domination, encoded in symbols, rituals, and whispered commands. Those who knew this truth carried the heavy burden of knowledge and the dangerous responsibility of wielding it. The story of Cedar Mills is a fragment of a larger narrative, one that continues to unfold beneath the surface of American history. Control is sustained not just by secrets but by fear, a weapon wielded with precision and subtlety. The descendants of the triplets, and those who inherited their knowledge, understood this deeply. They cultivated fear not through overt violence, but through psychological warfare. Whispers in the dark, carefully leaked rumors, and the manipulation of guilt and shame. They mastered the art of isolation, cutting off dissenters from their communities, making betrayal a personal and spiritual death sentence. Fear became a cage, invisible but unbreakable, conditioning minds to obey without question. The psychological control extended to entire populations, who learned to police themselves, fearful of what might happen if they stepped outside the invisible lines. This is why so many truths remain buried, why voices that challenge the system are silenced or dismissed as madness. Because the cost of awakening is high, and the forces maintaining this web will stop at nothing to protect their dominion. The suppression of forbidden knowledge is not accidental. It is systematic, deliberate, and ruthless. Institutions, universities, religious orders, government bodies have acted as gatekeepers of what is allowed to be known, shaping collective memory by what they choose to record or erase. Records disappear. Books are burned. Scholars vanish or are discredited. Entire narratives are rewritten or buried beneath layers of official silence. This institutional manipulation is the backbone of control, ensuring that the truths held by the few, the triplets' descendants and their allies, never reach the many. It is a constant battle fought in archives and libraries, in courtrooms and churches. Every revelation is met with denial, every discovery with disinformation. The result is a society built on incomplete truths, where what is left unsaid is more powerful than what is spoken aloud. To pierce this veil requires courage, perseverance, and a willingness to face the isolation that comes with uncovering what was meant to remain hidden. This is the weight borne by those who dare to see. Disinformation is the lifeblood of this shadow war, a calculated flood of half-truths, lies, and distractions designed to confuse and divide. The moment a forbidden truth threatens to surface, the system unleashes its arsenal. Conspiracy theories branded as nonsense, whistleblowers painted as lunatics, and real knowledge buried beneath an avalanche of noise. This orchestrated chaos ensures that the few who see clearly are drowned out by the masses clinging to comforting illusions. The triplet story, with its unsettling truths and inexplicable phenomena, was no exception. For decades, it was dismissed as folklore, an outlier in the tidy pages of history books. Yet, those who have taken the time to peel back the layers find a pattern repeated again and again, a pattern of silence enforced by fear and deception. The war for truth is fought not only in shadows but in the minds of every individual willing to listen and question. And the stakes could not be higher. Freedom of thought, autonomy, even the survival of the soul itself hangs in the balance. Power does not reside in a single throne or office. It is a network, an invisible architecture connecting families, corporations, and institutions bound by unspoken oaths. The descendants of the triplets found themselves woven into this network, rising quietly to positions where influence is wielded not with force, but with subtlety. Boardrooms, political committees, religious councils. All stages where the legacy of Cedar Mills unfolds in silent decisions that shape millions of lives. This is the machinery behind the scenes, a system designed to maintain order through control of information and perception. It operates through loyalty and fear, rewarding obedience and punishing dissent without a single public headline. Generations are groomed to understand their place in this web, inheriting not just wealth or status but the responsibility to uphold the secrets that sustain the system. This continuity is no accident. It is carefully orchestrated to ensure that the invisible chains remain unbroken. Understanding this network is crucial to seeing how history repeats itself and why the Triplets story is still relevant today. At the heart of this network lies psychological conditioning, an unseen force shaping beliefs, values, and behavior. From childhood, individuals are immersed in rituals, education, and media designed to reinforce loyalty to the system. They learn to accept hierarchy without question, to trust authorities implicitly, and to dismiss dissent as dangerous or irrational. This conditioning creates a society where conformity is rewarded and curiosity punished. The Triplets' legacy teaches us that this is no accident but a deliberate strategy to maintain control. By shaping minds early, the system ensures compliance long before resistance can take root. Breaking free requires more than awareness. It demands the courage to reject deeply ingrained beliefs and confront the isolation that follows. The path to true freedom is a solitary one, marked by constant vigilance and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Awakening to the system's design is as much a psychological battle as it is intellectual. Those who break the surface of illusion often find themselves isolated, alienated from friends, family, and society at large. The Triplets, with their piercing awareness, lived this exile in microcosm, unable to fully connect, trapped between worlds. This loneliness is the system's weapon, designed to wear down resistance and corrode resolve. When those who see clearly are cast aside or dismissed, the comfort of ignorance remains the refuge of the many. But isolation is also a crucible. It forges resilience, sharpens insight, and strengthens the will to persevere. To stand against the web of control requires embracing solitude without surrendering to despair. It demands a warrior's mindset, disciplined, vigilant, and unyielding. The journey is perilous, but the alternative is eternal servitude beneath invisible chains. Awakening is not simply about uncovering hidden truths. It is a transformation of self. When the veil lifts, you no longer see the world as you once did. Familiar realities dissolve, replaced by harsh clarity. This transformation demands you redefine who you are, no longer a passive participant in the system, but an active agent of change. It is a rebirth, a shedding of old illusions that once bound your mind and spirit. But transformation is not painless. It requires confronting inner darkness, fears, doubts, and the weight of knowledge that few can bear. The Triplet story is a testament to this journey. From innocent children born into secrecy, to bearers of a heavy burden that shaped their very souls. To walk this path is to accept that life will never be the same. But it is also to gain power, the power to see, to understand, and to act beyond the constraints imposed by hidden forces. If you are ready, the journey begins here. Now that you stand at the threshold of this forbidden knowledge, the choice is yours. Will you retreat into comfortable ignorance, or step boldly into the shadow to reclaim your power? The forces you face are formidable, ancient, patient, and ruthless, but they are not invincible. Awakening is the first act of rebellion, the crack in the facade of control. You must learn to recognize the signs, the subtle manipulations, the orchestrated distractions, the lies dressed as truth. Only then can you begin to dismantle the system from within. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It requires discipline, courage, and a relentless hunger for truth. But the reward is freedom. Freedom from manipulation, fear, and the chains that bind humanity's potential. This is your moment, your awakening. Awakening is not a single event. It is a process, a continuous sharpening of awareness and will. It demands that you question everything, your beliefs, your sources of information, even your own perceptions. The Triplets' legacy reminds us that clarity comes through vigilance, not comfort. You must develop your mind into a fortress, resistant to manipulation and deception. Discipline in thought leads to discipline in action. This means cultivating habits that reinforce your autonomy, critical thinking, emotional regulation, and the ability to discern truth from lies. It also means surrounding yourself with others who seek truth, creating a network of awareness and support. The path is lonely, but you do not have to walk it alone. Together, the awakened form a force that can pierce the veils of control and reclaim humanity's lost power. The journey is hard, but the prize is worth every sacrifice. Isolation can be the greatest threat to your awakening, but it doesn't have to be your fate. Across history, those who have glimpsed the hidden have found strength in community. The Triplet story reminds us that survival depends on connection, shared knowledge, shared vigilance. In today's world, forming alliances with like-minded seekers is vital. These connections provide not only safety but also the exchange of ideas and strategies needed to navigate the labyrinth of control. Solidarity among the awakened creates ripples that disrupt the system's grip. It is a quiet rebellion, one conversation at a time, one truth shared, one network built. Your allies are out there waiting for the signal. Reach out, build your circle, and stand unbroken. Together, you are a force that no hidden power can suppress. Symbols and rituals have been used for millennia, not just to control but to empower. The Triplets' whispered language was more than communication. It was a ritualized bond, a code that shaped reality itself. When you understand this, you realize the true power of symbols. They are keys to unlocking and reshaping consciousness. By consciously engaging with symbols and rites of your own choosing, you reclaim agency over your mind and spirit. These acts become declarations of independence from the system's invisible chains. They disrupt the patterns of control woven through culture and tradition. Whether it's a simple gesture, a mantra, or a crafted ritual, these symbolic acts become your tools, anchors in a world designed to unmoor you. Harness this power. Make it your own. This is not superstition. It is mastery. Knowledge is the most dangerous weapon you can wield. The Triplet story reveals how knowledge can be both a burden and a shield. Those who hold forbidden knowledge walk a razor's edge, targeted by forces desperate to maintain their grip on power. But knowledge is also liberation, the only path to freedom from manipulation. The institutions you trust have long controlled information, curating what you can and cannot know. Breaking free means seeking truths they have buried, questioning the official narrative, and embracing uncomfortable realities. Every piece of hidden knowledge you uncover chips away at the walls built to contain your mind. But beware. The pursuit of truth is a battleground, and knowledge without wisdom can be as dangerous as ignorance. To wield this weapon effectively, you must pair knowledge with discernment, strategy, and courage. Only then can you strike at the heart of the system and reclaim your power. Facing forbidden truth comes at a price. The Triplets paid that price. Their innocence, their safety, their lives. The burden of knowledge isolates, disturbs, and demands sacrifice. Yet it also grants a power beyond measure. To see through the lies is to step into sovereignty. To understand the manipulation is to gain mastery over it. But this mastery demands vigilance, a constant battle against complacency and doubt. You will be tested. Your resolve will be challenged. Friends will turn away. Systems will push back. But for those who endure, the reward is freedom. Freedom from unseen chains, from the puppeteers in the shadows. This is no fairy tale. It is reality for those who choose to awaken. Knowledge without action is a hollow victory. The Triplet story teaches us that understanding alone is not enough. You must translate awakening into disciplined, intentional action. Every choice becomes a battlefield, how you spend your time, who you trust, what you allow into your mind. This disciplined living builds resistance, a fortress against manipulation. It rewires your brain and spirit to resist the default programming of control. You become the architect of your own fate, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. This is how revolutions begin, not with violence but with small, deliberate acts of defiance. The enemy fears the awakened mind, but it respects discipline and strategy. Embrace this truth. Live with purpose. This is a war of patience. A slow, grinding battle fought over lifetimes. The forces you confront are ancient, patient beyond measure. They build empires not in days, but across centuries, weaving control into the very fabric of society. Your resistance must match their endurance. Impulsive action will be crushed, fleeting outrage ignored. True power comes from persistence, the steady refusal to accept lies, the continuous pursuit of truth, the relentless commitment to awakening. This long game demands faith in yourself when the world seems indifferent or hostile. It requires you to be a silent warrior, forging change quietly yet irrevocably. Remember the triplets. Their legacy is proof that even in the darkest moments, seeds of transformation can take root. Your journey is part of this unfolding story. Patience is your weapon, persistence your shield. You have journeyed deep into the shadows, beyond the veil most dare not pierce. Now you stand transformed, no longer the man who began this path. The truths you have uncovered are dangerous, heavy, and irrevocable. They strip away illusions and expose the mechanisms of control that shape your reality. But with this knowledge comes power, the power to see, to resist, and to reshape your destiny. The triplet story is not just a dark mystery. It is a blueprint for awakening. It challenges you to rise above fear, to claim your sovereignty, and to walk your own path. Remember this moment. Speak the phrase, twice aloud or in your mind, I am the master of my fate. I walk the hidden path. Let it seal your transformation, anchor you in truth, and mark you as awake. The system fears the awakened because they are free. Now you are one of them. The path ahead is perilous, but you will never walk it alone. You have the knowledge. You have the will. Now take your place in the battle for freedom and never look back. Before you go, remember, this journey is just beginning. Share your thoughts below. Tell me where you stand, what you see, and how the triplet story has shaken your world. If you're ready to take control of your fate and join a community of awakened men, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Together, we will continue to uncover the truths hidden in plain sight and dismantle the chains of manipulation. Comment now. I am the master of my fate. I walk the hidden path. Say it twice. Lock it in. Claim your power. Your awakening matters. Your voice matters. And here you are never alone.